maybe we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Sonia, Hani, Brittany, He. My name is Jessica Kahn. I direct the KL2 program at UC, which is part of our CCTST. Krista Metz is our program manager. And our guest speaker today is Brett Harnett from UC, and we welcome you, Brett. This is our K Club series, which we have every month, and it's directed towards, primarily towards junior investigators. We are going to announce our next 6 months of K Club soon. So we'll be sending that series out. If you have suggestions for K Club, please feel free to reach out to me, to Jason Blackard, who's our co-director of the program, or to Krista. Please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what topics you'd like us to schedule meetings around, seminars around. So we also send out an evaluation after the talk, so please be on the lookout for that. Please do complete that evaluation. It really helps us and our speakers to improve our series. So thank you in advance for completing that. So again, today's speaker is Brett Harnett. He's going to be speaking on clinical research informatics capabilities at UC. And Brett is an assistant professor at UC. He's in the Department of Biomedical Informatics. He joined the faculty in 2004, and he currently serves as the director for the UC Center for Health Informatics, crucial position in the university. And prior to joining UC, Brett was the director of experimental information technology for a NASA-sponsored research program in Virginia, and was also a systems analyst at Yale. He's also served in a number of capacities at UC and around the country. He serves on the University of Cincinnati Institutional Review Board, as a scientific reviewer at NIH, as a member of the editorial board for the Telemedicine and eHealth Journal, and as a course director in the BMI graduate program. He was just telling us a little bit about the course that he's teaching. So thank you so much, Brett. Welcome. We really appreciate your time in giving this seminar.
Thank you, Jessica, for the kind introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'm pleased to be here to introduce some of the clinical informatics processes, capabilities that we supply at the College of Medicine. We work very, very closely with Children's and UC Health, and it's a large, complicated system that is filled with regulatory capabilities and requirements. And part of our job here is to make sure that we can provide services and data to the research community that is under the proper mechanisms and all of the regulatory requirements that we are faced with. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about kind of the background as to how we do it. And you know, over my years, I've talked to a lot of people in peer roles, and what I'm describing to you is certainly not unique. It's kind of a standardized process on how data gets from the electronic health record into the hands of researchers. So I'm not going to go into all the regulatory details. I'll mention a few of them, but this will put it in perspective for you as you march forward in your research careers and how you deal with clinical data for primarily research, because the rules are very, very different for research and operations. So with that, let me go ahead and launch my screen here. Once again, thanks for having me. I'm going to speak primarily in terms of UC and UC Health, but I know a lot of the people in the K Club are associated with Children's. Children's has a very similar process. Children's has a division of biomedical informatics, and they, do a lot of the same things that we do on this side of the street. So we often, have the challenge of, is what we're doing, is what you're doing research, or is it operations? And they need to know where to go for that. So for us, in biomedical informatics at UC, we have, I wear kind of two hats here. I wear the faculty hat for research and teaching, and then I also wear a director hat for overseeing a technical team. We have 5 experts, technical experts on the team. who are trained in the Epic data model, who understand all the issues with compliance, de-identification, what we can do, what we can't do. And so I oversee that team, and every day we are extracting data from Epic for research. So we have an agreement with UC Health where we are the designated honest broker for UC Health to distribute clinical data. And that's really important because we can't have investigators accessing data through nefarious sources that are then used in the research procedures. And if something goes wrong, if there's a breach, we have to backtrack and find out where it all came from. We have the UC, and we are the appointed team for that, is we have a business associate agreement with UC Health. And what that means is if there was a breach of some sort, there's a whole series of mechanisms that would kick in to mitigate what's happened including reporting and response. Thankfully, we have not had a breach, and if there was, it's a very significant challenge because there's lots of pathways that data can enter the system, and then trying to track that down is very problematic. So one of the big questions we asked was, if I need data, where do I go? Well, if it's clinical data for quality assurance or quality improvement, you go to UC Health. There's a data analytics team there, and Children's has the same type of thing. So if you're doing something that's not generalizable research, if it's something you're working on, you're trying to figure out a problem in the institution, you're trying to make things better, faster, cheaper, safer, then that's not generalizable research. That data can be extracted, it can be used for some sort of analysis, outcome-oriented type of process. If, however, it's research, then they're supposed to come through the honest broker, the CHI, the Center for Health Informatics, and then in there we have all the mechanisms to process data. And then sometimes it's a gray area. It used to be, geez, am I going to publish? Then it's probably going to be research. But in the last 5-10 years, there's been a research or journals dedicated towards QA and QI. So is that considered research, or is that you're just publishing your institutional QA QI outcomes? So that's kind of a gray area. And if that's the case, we usually figure that out. And we're actually not allowed to do QA QI operations. That if it gets sent to us and we determine it's a QA QI, we send it back to UC Health and then they take it. And then sometimes it's the other way around. They get research and they kick it back to us. So one of the things I want to point out is that we have to remember that Epic is an electronic health record, and its primary function is healthcare, is dealing with clinical outcomes for patients in the institution. Electronic health records were not designed for research. Now, if you talk to some of the EHR vendors like Epic or Allscripts or Cerner, they have research components in, they have research modules, they're kind of going into that area. It might be things such as informed consent, or, how do we keep track of who's in what studies? Because if they're on an experimental drug in a research study and it counteracts with something negatively with another medication, that's a dangerous situation. So they need to know who's in studies. So those things are in there. But primarily, research is an external function of the health record. And so we, as the honest broker, help facilitate that type of, those types of operations. So what do? To aid research, we get things, we build things, we coordinate things, and as you heard at the very beginning, we teach things. And so again, part of my role is research and teaching. And I think for me, I'm 60% of my effort is research, about 20% is teaching. And I personally teach 2 courses in the BMI graduate program, and that is the Introduction to Medical Informatics course, which occurs every fall, which we're just finishing up this semester. And I also co-direct the BMI practicum, which is what is specifically focused on the PhD students. So when the PhD students come into the program, one of the required classes is the intro class, and then another required class is the practicum, which is kind of a capstone, which is after I see them in the first year they're here, and then I see them 2.5 years later when they complete their programmatic responsibilities and they demonstrate what they can do. And that's what the practicum is. I don't know, some of you may be familiar with the BMI graduate program, but we've got some really good things going on. So I encourage you to look at that if you're interested in further education in informatics. So as I mentioned, we've had a business associate agreement with UC Health, I think, going back since to 2007 or so. I think the latest iteration was 2015. It actually needs to be updated again. But we work in terms of providing data for for grant submissions, preliminary studies. Here's what I do on a Saturday afternoon, winter afternoon, where I take my Scrabble board and I built this this little word scheme, and it kind of spells out what informatics does in terms of research. We were determined back in I think 2018 or 2017 a government cost control service center, which complicates our world because we have to charge for services, and we can't charge the government any more than what we would charge for a non-governmental program. This goes way back to the 1970s or 1980s, where someone got in a lot of trouble for selling hammers to hardware stores for $8, and we're selling them to the government for $500. So since then, they put in this cost control compliance mechanisms where we have to charge the same or less to the government. And I'm talking, of course, about federal grants, primarily NIH. But we have got these rules. We have to charge we have an established rate to do functions, and that's $89 an hour. A lot of what we do is subsidized by the CCTST. And what I mean by that is I can't use the word discount. So I didn't say the word discount, but that's what it actually comes down to, is that for certain services, if you request data through a standard mechanism, you have up to, I believe it's 16 hours, which is subsidized by the CCTST. So the first 16 hours, there's no cost to you. And then for other things, there's a discount. But what that does is it's a mechanism where we can use the goal of the CCTST to promote clinical and translational science, and in terms of getting data for research. So the CCTST is a big player in what we do, and a huge supporter of making sure that we do things the best way possible. So what you see right here is a screenshot of our portal, and we have the categories are, we have consultations for grant development. So if you're putting together a grant and you're looking for preliminary information, we are multiple things that we can do to provide data to you and self-service tools. One of those self-service tools is Trinetics. You may also have heard a tool which I think you use a lot more at Children's is I2B2. I2B2 is a older legacy cohort identification tool that was developed by Partners Healthcare in Boston, and it then scaled out to a freely available component that allows people to self-service and look for cohorts based on certain clinical criteria. We still have I2B2, but since 2015, we subscribed to Trinetics. I'm going to give you some more information about Trinetics shortly, so I won't go into it now. But from an institutional perspective, it does the same thing. It identifies patient cohorts. We have I2B2 under the hood. We don't actually even promote that anymore because Trinetics is so much more rich and robust. We keep I2B2 because we are a CTSA awardee. We are required to have I2B2 in the event they ever want to do this sharing of platforms through a mechanism called Shrine. And people who know me know that I do not like Shrine, and Trinetics has it built in automatically. So using Shrine I2B2 is not really the best way to go, in my opinion. So if I go further down the list here, we have clinical data extractions, we have fully identified data sets, we have de-identified data sets, we have limited data sets. The rules are different for each one of those. Data for grant submissions, you need preliminary data for your grant. We can help you. And in fact, we can do a little bit more for you if you include one of the BMI faculty members here. That's either me or Danny Wu, there's only two of us. And or if you agree to purchase X amount of services from the technical team in your grant mechanism, so we can work with you more to get more bang for your buck, so to speak, for your grant submissions. We have term searching with a product called Immerse. I'll talk about that later as well, and other things. You know, we don't run REDCap. Children's runs a REDCap instance here for both institutions. Now, I'll also just note briefly that UC Health has their own version of REDCap that they've used primarily for surveys for the Linear Center of Hope for quite a few years. But that's changing to research because of a standard called FHIR. I'll get to that also as well. We do some data exploration, visualization, biostatistical services. We don't do that anymore. We work with environmental health or BIRD over Children's through the CCTST. And then we also do custom software development. And I'll show you a couple examples of that as well. Krista, how am I doing? Everything coming through okay?
You're doing great.
Oh. So what do our data analysts do? Well, at least for the time being, things may change with that new protocol I just mentioned, that new standard. But we have trained analysts that work in Epic every single day. And Epic, as you may or may not know, is built onto a front end and a back end architecture. The front end architecture is commonly known as hyperspace. From a data perspective, it filters down to a system called Chronicles. That's the data structure. So when that's your transactional system. So when physicians and nurses enter data into Epic, when they're sitting across from you in the exam room, or anything else they do to order tests, for example, that's in the operational system in hyperspace. That's where all clinicians live. Every night at 2 o'clock in the morning, everything that was entered or changed in Epic's Chronicles in hyperspace gets uploaded to another system called Clarity. Clarity is a relational structure. It's very large. It's a number of terabytes in size. But it is a relational structure of about 23,000 tables. And we don't use 23,000 tables. We probably use about 70 to get what we need, generally speaking, for most research requests. But when the research comes through our portal, IRB approval, all that other stuff, business alignment with funding, check, all these things are done. Our analysts are assigned, one of our analysts is assigned to extract the data that the clinician, the researcher needs. That's inclusion, exclusion criteria, date range, and so forth. And what you see in this area here is what we call SQL Server Studio, Structured Query Language Studio. This is your things where you select. These are these are terms that we database people use select, where, from, group by, order by. So and this query could go 6, 7, 8, 10 pages long. They're very complex. But what it does, it extracts data from those, I'll say 70 tables that we normally use. We extract that data and we put it in, and we get the patients that you need based on what you requested. And there's two reasons for that primarily. The first one would be something like retrospective research, where you want to get 500 patients and you want to look at outcomes analysis and over periods of time, and you would do your analysis and publish a paper. You never contact those people. And then you get into the issues of a waiver of consent. So you don't actually request consent from patients to get their data to do a retrospective analysis. There's no reason to do that. However, if you are accessing data for recruitment for a prospective study, that's a different story. And then we have the IRB has what they call a partial waiver of consent. And what that means is, if you are running a clinical trial and you need I don't know, 40 patients for your study, and you might want to say, these are 300 patients that meet the criteria. And so we would find those 300 patients for you, or maybe 500 or 1,000. And then through your IRB protocol, you would say, I'm going to send letters to them or something like that. There's lots of ways to recruit patients for studies. But it's called the partial waiver of consent. Is you have a right to ask us to get the data for those lists of names. Again, you wouldn't get consent from patients to say, geez, can I get your name so I can send you a letter? It just doesn't make sense. So you get a partial waiver of consent that says, we don't have to get consent to get these names from the CHI, but once you get those names and you recruit them into your study trial, you still consent them. So they still fill out their informed consent for their study, saying the risks and the benefits and things like that. I agreed to this. So it's not a full waiver of consent, it's a partial waiver. It says I need a list of names. That's what you're waiving. And here what you see in the foreground is an Excel file. Now I also need to mention that we typically don't like to use Excel as a research function. In fact, one of my roles on the IRB is to, when people say they want to use Excel to manage their clinical trial, the answer is pretty much a no. And this is a really good reason for it. You want to use things like RedCap or some other electronic data capture. Excel is a desktop tool, but we do use Excel to give people a list of names. So it's a little bit of a dysfunction there, but it's just a list of names. It's not part of the research function. It's like, here's your names, and these are 13 names or 12 names that you can use for whatever. They're made up names, of course. I just want to show you this quickly. We use various tools to help do analysis of data. And so we work with biostatisticians in many cases. Sometimes we don't, because it's pretty straightforward. In this is a Power BI sample. We used to use Tableau. Tableau has some licensing issues at the university, very complex. I don't even talk about it. But Power BI there's no restrictions on that. So this is something, and actually this is something we did for a children's project for cardiology for very sick children with heart problems. So I want to talk about some other tools that we can provide to you, because that's kind of what the point of this discussion is. So I want to circle back now to Trinetics. The primary goal of Trinetics is to provide data to pharmaceutical companies and contract research organizations so they can find patients for their studies. So this is primarily on the industry side. And of course, we bring in millions of dollars through NIH grants, but we also bring in quite a bit of funding from external industry-sponsored sources. And this goes back to I2B2. So Trinetics is a company based out of Cambridge, Boston. And they were actually, people who started Trinetics were consultants with I2B2. And someone said at some point that geez, the pharmaceutical companies have the same problems that academic research institutions have, is that's finding people for studies, finding subjects, recruiting, enrolling them, randomizing them. And it's often a problem to get people to participate in research. So these people who started Trinetics said, hold on a second, I have an idea. The pharmaceutical companies are willing to pay to have access to who has what in their repository. By that I mean, what patients do they have that meet certain criteria? So if you're looking for people with atrial fibrillation over the age of 50, who are on warfarin, who are also diabetic, who are African American, who don't have psoriasis. Okay, I'm just making that up, but we can do that. We do that every day. But the pharmaceutical company said it'd be really cool if we had a network of healthcare organizations and they made available to us their patient populations. It's de-identified. And Trinetics went out and built an unbelievably robust interface that allows pharmaceutical companies to subscribe to their network. Now, I can say that UC was the third healthcare organization to sign up for Trinetics in 2015 because I saw the benefits. The benefits are twofold. Number one, by sharing our de-identified information, our cohort list with a tool to find what you're looking for, brings clinical studies into the university. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think I'm going to guess we've had probably about 200 requests for us to join a clinical trial to be funded by a pharmaceutical. And we've probably taken, I don't know, half of them, 40% for whatever reason. There's lots of issues involved in contracting and things. And I'll show you what the interface looks like in a minute, but the other advantage is that we can use it as a cohort identification tool internally, just for us. And that replaces I2B2 because it's so much more robust. And again, we populate I2B2 every week. It's in the background. And then we have an appliance in our data center owned by Trinetics, loaned to us, so to speak. And that processes everything from I2B2 to the Trinetics interface. So we get studies brought into the institution, and we have an internal tool to find stuff. This is what it looks like. My glasses on. So on the left-hand side, I won't go into the details here. I don't have time, but if you look here, you can say you have a must-have requirement and a cannot have. So in this case, this is lung cancer who are on benzos and have a certain level of greater than 96 value in the chloride values. And if you again, this is a screenshot, but you click that, you have all these capabilities to edit them granularly. Notice here the Boolean logic, we have and. So you have to have this and this and this. You have to have all three of these. You could change this to or if that was the requirement. You could say, or you could have this or this or this or this. And then they Then you say you cannot have thyroid supplements. If they are on thyroid supplements, they don't qualify for this study because of the exclusion criteria. And then we also added in here a time constraint of this test was done within the last year. See, this is 1 year ago. So what Trinetics does, it allows you to include, exclude, and to have a temporal sequence of saying when something happened. And there's other benefits of that I'll cover in just a minute. So you would count patients in the upper right-hand corner, and then you see you have 1,220 patients. And notice it says one HCO, that's one healthcare organization, that's us. So this is a researcher, actually I think I did this one, but a researcher saying how many people to have cancer on benzos with a chloride level of greater than 96 done in the last year, et cetera, 1,220 patients. Now we go to the next screen, which explores the cohort. What it does then rolls those 1,220 patients up into a cohort. And it gives you a quick overview of the demographics through a histogram. Notice here, patients over 90 are all grouped into one category per HIPAA regulations. And then we have some basic statistics on here and a breakdown of the demographics. Now you can go, dive down further. Look on left-hand side of the screen, we have demographics I just showed you. We also have diagnoses, procedures, medications, labs. We don't do genomics yet. And these are of the 1,220 patients. So if you look at these 1,220 patients, all of their diagnoses, beyond the ones you put in there, what are the diagnoses do these patient populations have? Well, here you can see, and you can expand it into details, and then what percentage of it, what percentage of the population has this disease. So you might find that interesting in terms of if you're doing a retrospective analysis in particular. We also do procedures. What procedures do these 1,220 patients have? We also can tell what medications these 1,220 patients are on and the labs of these as well. Now, I want to also add that this is a self-service tool. So you can go through our portal, sign up, get permissions. You can go through a couple of really, really short training videos and be up and running. And this allows you to go in and create your own studies, save them. And then once you get to what you're looking for, let's say it's either for retrospective analysis or it's for patient recruitment, is that we can get those names for you. Names, MRNs, whatever details you want according to a research protocol that you have. So we can reverse engineer your query. You simply share the query with us. We go through and we can backhaul it to the source data and find out who those patients are. And then we can deliver them through an Excel spreadsheet. But another interesting thing that you can do with this is outcomes analysis. So on board in Trinetics, you can do outcomes analysis. They've got a couple of really cool tools that allow you as researchers to dive into your selected cohort. And this is an example of what I did a couple of years ago of atrial fibrillation patients, and then a comparison of outcomes based on, I think it was ischemic stroke. Comparing apixaban to warfarin. So what you do is this is a dense analysis. So I'm just going to give a couple quick screenshots. Once you go through all of the connections that Trinetics needs you to do, it'll show the outcomes. And the reason we can do that is because we have 6 years of data in here. So if you go back and say someone has to have a diagnosis of AFib before 2016, and they have to have been on apixaban or warfarin before 2016. So then let's go look 5 years ahead, in the past ahead to 2021. And what happened to those patients? How many of them had an ischemic stroke within those 6 years? This will tell you. Through the built-in, this is all built in on the website based on your cohort analysis. Now, that's interesting, except last year, we enhanced this capability to the research network. So 3 years ago, Trinetics says, you know what? It would be really powerful if the healthcare organizations, by the way, I told you we were the third one to join. I think there's 140 now. 140 around the globe. Excuse me, flash myself. And about a third of those 140 organizations are on the research network. So now, in our system, we have 1.2 million patients. That's our active patient population. And we did an analysis on outcomes of apixaban versus warfarin, found out what it was. And what we can do now is take that exact same analysis and then choose, let me show you here for a second, go back for, here it said 1HCO, that's us. If you click this down arrow, it says research network. So again, here we have well, actually this is a little older, it's 1.2 million now, but so now we're part of the research network. So instead of running an analysis of 1.2 million patients, we want to generalize even further and run the exact same analysis over 70 million patients. So now we can do our exact same analysis and click a drop-down button, choose the larger patient cohort of the research network, and the analysis comes up immediately. So that's one of the key features that we're starting to promote. And I actually have to go back and relearn the outcomes analysis thing because it's changed in a couple of years. But it's we actually had a request just 2 weeks ago that was a perfect candidate for this to find out, what happens if someone took something else in terms of, their clinical outcomes a couple of years later. So that's what this is a really awesome tool for. Also in Trinetics, we have cancer staging. And this kind of, once you do your query for cancer, you can then click down and see what staging they are. So again, we update this weekly, and I'll tell you why. It used to be monthly, it's weekly. I'll tell you why in a minute. So I'm going to skip now to a couple of other tools that we built. I mentioned earlier that we do software development. We have got two really skilled software developers, and they built some interesting tools. One of them is called the Cchmc. This was for the cardiac division. And what we had was there was a need for the cardiology researchers to find out details about cardiac procedures and measurements through their various methodologies. And the problem is only certain data from those modalities gets into Epic. All the other source data stays in the source system, the vendor system called Merge Cardio. So this is, we're looking at echo procedures in this example. And so only a portion of the echo procedures, generally a note, goes into Epic. No one else sees all the other millions of measurements that are taken in the Merge Cardio system for echo. And so if we've got 600,000 patients, we've got 2.7 million imaging procedures. You can save your cohorts. I'm just going to go through this fairly quickly, but you can describe your patient population. So you are kind of like Trinetics, defining your initial population. And you're looking for these with unspecified atrial fibrillation. And here we have 19,000 patients. Notice there's two tabs here, imaging studies as well. So if we go to the imaging study, we want to say, okay, of those that cohort, how many of those people had a moderate increase in left ventricle chamber thickness? So all this data was in Merge Cardio. It doesn't get it into Epic. So what we did, we reverse engineered the data model for Merge Cardio, and we were able to extract the data, legally extract the data, and put it into this warehouse or data mart. and then put an interface on top of it. So now we have, 4.4% of the population had a thicker left ventricle. Okay, so now we started with 19,000 patients. So as soon as we add another criteria, now we're down to 1,000 patients. So now it gets much smaller. You can see on the right-hand side, there's our diagnosis code, and then here's our imaging study inclusion criteria, which is a moderate increase in thickness of the left ventricle. And the numbers get smaller. And then we have some summary statistics here. What other diagnoses do they have? Medications, what procedures were done, and then you click on the next step, and you can export that data into a table, and you can comma separated table, XML, JSON, whatever format you want, whatever your statistician wants to look at. So this is one tool that we've built. This was a few years ago. Last year, we were asked to build a similar type of architecture for COVID. We call it Covidicus. And this is a platform we call Chiron. It's actually was based on the Asclepius framework, and then we actually added new features to it. And you can see on the left-hand side, where my arrow go. Krista, can you see my arrow?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, good. So on the left-hand side, you have all of these categories: demographics, admissions, diagnoses, flow sheet data, medication, problem list. And again, I don't have time to go through this now, but you can click and drag these things over here into, you add it, and it shows up as values. And when we did this initial query for whatever the query was, we found 146 patients. We added additional time constraints in here, and now we're reduced down to 119 patients. And then we can further check on what type of race values we want in there. And we came down to 22 patients. So you have taken a 19,000 patients, or not 19,000, I'm sorry, it's the other one, 146 patients, and narrowed it down to 22 patients that met your exact criteria for COVID and other things that were associated with that patient. So again, it's a cohort identification tool. This is not a self-service tool. It's too complex for the average person, researcher to go in. They've had to spend a lot of time understanding the structure, and the learning curve is steep. So we provide this as a service to find COVID patients with very specific criteria. Another tool that we offer is called Immerse. So Immerse is, how am I doing on time here? Okay. We are in our 5th year of the Immerse program. This is an NIH-funded program through partners we have at Michigan. And the idea, this was actually a tool built by Michigan in, I think it was around 2009, 2010, but allows you to search for terms in notes. This is not natural language processing. This finds words. So this, we're actually in the process of upgrading this to the new interface, but we currently have 27 million notes. This is out of date. It's actually 57 million notes, and that's 800,000. We have 1 million patients in here. And we have almost all of our patients are now indexed in here because everyone has a note somewhere in their record. And like I said, this is now 57 million notes. So you have got 57 million notes, and at UC Health, we have 72 note types, everything from telephone encounters to progress notes and radiology notes and everything in between. So you can imagine you're looking for a particular term, not a concept like you could do with natural language processing, but a term. And here's an example. And this is just a silly one we did for promotion a couple years ago. My T2 clinical trial needs to enroll 14 subjects who have the HER2 receptor and drink iced tea. So HER2 receptor has to do with breast cancer, and it's not a discrete field in EPIC, and it's always found in the notes. Maybe someday it will be discrete. but right now it's not. So you're looking for HER2 where it's mentioned in the notes. How many do we have? Here's the research asking that question, and they would click submit. Hold on a second, 3 seconds. We have 65. So what that means is it searched 57 million notes, 1 million patients, and it found where the term T, like drink iced tea, and HER2 were found. Is there any correlation between drinking iced tea and breast cancer? No, of course not. I don't know. But this is just an example to say, who has got T and HER2 mentioned somewhere in one of those notes. So you can imagine if you're trying to find patients, why would you look through all of these chart reviews when the term you're looking for is not even there? You still have to review the notes, but this tells you which ones to look at. So this is a product that was built by Michigan in 2010. 5 years ago, we were awarded with Michigan, also Case Western, UNC UK, and Columbia University to work together to make this better and to create a more network-based platform and to increase and enhance the interface, which is actually being done right now. Just as an FYI, there's been over 200 publications where Immerse has been referenced. Most of them have been with Michigan in the earlier days. I'm co-author on one that came out last year. This is our standard operating procedure. You have to go through and test that you're doing the right thing. And there's even more details once you get inside, because once you get inside, you can see all of these notes. So there's lots of rules around how you use the system and what you search on, and it's all course tracked. Again, there we have 1 million patients, 57 million notes currently. This was, I think, a couple of days ago. This is what it looks like, and this is all being changed. This interface I don't like. This was part of the grant, is to increase it. But you can put in things such as non-small, stage 4, stage 3, non-small cell lung cancer. And then the different colors represent Boolean logic. So the same color means it can have any of these terms. The different terms mean they have to have all of these terms. So I can have any of these tan terms, any of these maroon terms, any of these yellow terms. And there's a synonym dictionary that was built over the years that says, this amoxicillin is always typed wrong for some reason, or often typed wrong, and it's in there as a synonym, and you can include that. And it gives you a quick breakdown of where these notes are found for this particular term bundle. And then as you drill down into the interface, up here you can see what these are the synonyms. This is your query logic up here. And then over here would be the MRN and the patient name, obviously redacted here. And then where are the notes? We have it broken out into the main EHR, pathology, and radiology, because we just found that based on what Michigan told us, these are the categories that most people want to look at. So if you were to click on one of these boxes here, you come up with more details. So these are the patients with their, you can see that the terms you look for are color-coded. And then if you drill down even further, you actually see the note. So you would have to still read those notes. So but what this does is help you find which notes to read. And here's an example how this might work. I'm interested in how many patients we have with a diagnosis of malignant breast cancer and a CEA test greater than 6. Have to exclude any diagnosis of MRSA. Ideally, it would be helpful to scrub the notes to find where the term HER2 receptor is mentioned. That would definitely narrow the cohort. Now notice here, what we've done, we've put this together with Trinetics. So a researcher can use Trinetics, find their cohort, and here they went through all of their criteria and they found 50 patients that met most of these things here, except the HER2 receptor. Then they would go through the process of getting the MRNs. We would supply those MRNs. You can paste those MRNs into Immerse, and then you can search for HER2. And now all of a sudden, instead of 50 patients that you thought you had, you only have 22. Now, there are negation issues. It might be something, well, it could be negation or it could be something along their patient history. They might say in the note that their mother had breast cancer and she was HER2 positive. Well, okay, you don't want that one, but at least you knew it was in there. I want to move now as we start to wind down into, I mentioned FHIR earlier. So FHIR is Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. Without getting too technical, HL7, Health Level 7, has been around since the 1980s in terms of providing messaging within an institution and transferring data to other organizations through different iterations, V2, V3, not part of this lecture, but FHIR allows automated extraction of data from the electronic health record into a electronic data capture system. It does a lot of other things, but this is one example. This is one of the use cases for it. So what we do is we extract data out of Epic so you can put it into REDCap. Sometimes you don't. But if you're using REDCap for a longitudinal prospective study and you want to bring patient data in there, we'd get that information, give it to you. You would import it into REDCap. Not only is it expensive, multiple people touch it, there's copies of the data, then you got to stick it in a REDCap. Well, what FHIR does, and this is through a relationship with Vanderbilt, and because they built the system, where you can in REDCap enter a patient's name. Let's say you're trying to recruit somebody, and once you have them into the system, you simply click a button. A FHIR request will be made to Epic and pull all the data that you're looking for directly into REDCap. You don't need us, and I'm promoting this because there's other things that we need to be doing, not extracting data from REDCap or extracting data from Epic and put it in REDCap. But there, we actually had this in production before the pandemic. Pandemic hit, everything went elsewhere. And then since then, there was 3 upgrades to Epic. So the system broke. So now we have to revisit and fix it, apparently. But you can also move data from Epic into a third-party cloud service. One of them would be a company called Clinical Pipes. And the reason I mentioned Clinical Pipes is because our cancer center is starting to do this, where there's a mechanism where you can put in a Smart on FHIR app that actually pulls data from our Epic and pulls it in, goes into the cloud to an electronic data capture to a third-party system. Lots of requirements and compliance measures there, of course. But this is one of the neat things that's coming down the pike in terms of getting data quickly from the electronic health record into a research data repository, into an EDC.
Hey, Brett, there's a question in the chat.
Oh.
Is FHIR available at Cchmc?
I think you guys are getting very, very close. My last conversation with someone with actually Kevin Doofendock. Dr. Doofendock is your FHIR expert on that side, by the way. When I talked to him last, I think he said they were getting close. So I think we're probably about the same stage. We were actually a little ahead 2 years ago, but then we fell behind. So it's coming. You have to. If you are a healthcare organization and you're not using FHIR, you're going to not only be behind schedule against your peers, but you have federal laws you have to adhere to. And one of those is the 21st Century Cures Act, which specifically mandates using FHIR. So FHIR is a protocol built by HL7. It started in 2014. It got its production version approved, I think, in 2017 or 2018. So I continually press try to get FHIR implemented here at UC Health. There's just lots of hurdles, unfortunately. Children's is getting there, though. Getting back to your original question, yes. Are there any other questions? I'm not looking at the chat, like my full screen here. Okay.
I have a question, and I apologize if I missed this, but
Yep.
As far as Fire goes, it seems like a really powerful tool, but how exactly does it pull from Epic? Are you having to use smart phrases or flow sheets?
Nope, good question. It uses a RESTful API. So to be technical, it's an application programming interface, and it uses the whole idea behind Fire is to transfer data using internet technology, where you have these strings in the URL where it's all encoded and everything gets transferred in one request. So basically, it uses if you ever look at some of your URLs in your browser and Internet Explorer or whatever browser you use, you'll see these long strings across the top. They use that same technology to request data and then move it to where it needs to go. So it doesn't use smart phrases. It uses internet technology called a RESTful API.
Are they all discrete variables or?
They have to be discrete variables. They are talking about getting Fire to use unstructured text, but that's not the case right now. But it's those are discrete functions, discrete data elements.
Okay.
But it's still very powerful. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, so as we wrap up here, I want to just mention quickly, and children's is a good example for this rare disease research, is that you can use the Apple Health Kit and the Android Research Kit to build apps that you can scale across the globe with electronic consent and things like that. We're also part of the National COVID Collaborative. We upload data to that weekly through ITB or in conjunction with Trinetics. And that's a massive repository of COVID patients. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm readily accessible. I know that some people are going to watch on the recording. You give some thought to it. You want to ask some questions. Please email me directly. I'm happy to answer any other questions for you.